3 years ago, I left my home and joined the military straight out of high school. It was a hard decision, and I think about how my life could have been different every day, but I had to do it. I grew up in a very abusive household, and what I can remember of my childhood is unpleasant to say the least. My parents had me when they were in their early 20s, as my mom was in college and my dad was working as a car mechanic. My mom honestly had a very promising future ahead of her. She's the most talented violinist I've ever seen in my life. And just about the kindest person in the world. My father, on the other hand, is a severe narcissist. He didn't have the greatest childhood, and escaped a third-world country when he was just 16. Unfortunately, he never let me forget how hard he had it. He married my mom a year after meeting her, and they had me, causing my mom to drop out of school and subsequently leave the workforce. I'd like to imagine that at some point they must have loved me, but whenever that was, it passed very quickly. Long story short, they fell into financial trouble when I was a toddler and dumped me on my grandmother on my father's side. Things only went downhill as they had another child, my middle sister, who I'll call Kayla. They doted on this kid like no tomorrow, leaving me on the sidelines until I turned 8. Suddenly, they had beef with my grandmother and took me out of her care and isolated me from her until I turned 16. I had another sister, who I'll call Lee, shortly after they took me out of my grandmother's house. The three of us were very close, despite my father's attempts to ostracize me. My mother's low self-esteem has always kept her from opposing my very manipulative father, so as often as she witnessed the abuse, she did nothing to stop it. Because of this, I grew up pretty self-reliant. Despite my father sabotaging my attempts at going to college, I did the next best thing and joined the military. I'm over it now, and over the past 3 years, I've kept my distance and been very respectful to them. I've even been covering various expenses they have now that Kayla is heading to college and Lee is a really sickly kid. I've also been in therapy, and for the most part, I feel like I'm handling it pretty well. Well, a few months ago, I married my girlfriend of 2 years, who we'll call Bella. Being gay has been difficult as my parents are very strict Catholics, but at their request, I leave them out of it so they didn't know I was married. Last week, we moved out of the on-base dormitories into a rental house. Despite my protesting, they came by and gifted me some furniture and helped out with the moving process, planning on staying with me for 3 days. The first night that we moved in, Halloween, Bella's father passed away and she had to take emergency leave, leaving me with my parents and the new house for the next 2 weeks. During that time, my father and I got into an argument about some plans I had made for Christmas time, in which I would take Kayla and Lee to a theme park. He flipped out at me, telling me he owned them and that as much as I thought I was grown, I was not an adult and could not be trusted to care for his children, like I'm not his child too. He stormed out of the house and left for home shortly after, where, as I was informed by Kayla, he ranted to her about how shitty I was. My mom wasn't present, so last night when she questioned me on the phone about the reason my father was so angry now that he was home, I explained the situation to her and requested that if he had a problem with me, he should be upfront with the family instead of bashing me in front of my sisters who I love more than anything in this world. She didn't take it well and ratted me out to my father. This sicko retaliated by, I suspect, going through my mail before he left and then pulling a background check on me. One of my bank accounts is also still under his name, left forgotten from when I was a teenager, which he used to pool private information about my pay and my spending. He then compiled all this information and created a fucking binder of my private information which he used as a lecture tool on my younger sisters about how shitty I am for getting married behind their backs, not contributing more to the family, and various other things, including the details on a personal loan I recently took out to help me out in a difficult situation I was stuck in last month. I can't believe he did that and I'm so betrayed. And hurt, and I can't bring this up to them without seriously hurting my relationship with my immediate and extended family and friends. I have no idea how to react, but mostly I'm just livid and sad and have no idea what my next steps should be. Should I bust his ass for stealing my mail? Pulling a background check? Sharing my private banking information? This is just the shittiest thing he could have done, and I'm at a loss for words.